How's it going to come much in today with another video, and today I have to bring to you is the emergency ban list. And we've been talking about this for a little while now, if it could have happened, if it should happen, and it did. So we're talking a lot about how the format is going to be really impacted by this, and especially the fact that tier only has one Herald in the orange light now to deal with D Shifter, which is pretty crazy. Mystic Might is no longer in Sky Striker, and then Striker got no more support from the ban list either, so that's going to be rough as well. We'll talk about all that and more in the video. If you haven't already checked out my sponsors over an Imperial Duelist, a Dragon Shield, and Gem, definitely go down in the description below, check them all out. If you haven't already heard, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel, because once we hit 16,000 subscribers, so we're about 282 away right now, we're giving away the Spellground Player's Choice collaboration. I'm very excited to be able to give this away, so let's hit 16,000 subscribers so I can go ahead and do this giveaway. And without further ado, let's hop right on into our first topic. So the first thing I want to talk about is going to be the ban cards, starting off with Curious. Curious is one of those cards that was really never really made for anything healthy for the game, right? Because at first it was to grab Imperial Order, next it was to get Snow Engrave, then it's just like, what's the next thing, right? Having Curious and Griffin together in a format is just actually insane. The amount that those two can accomplish together is pretty crazy. So I think banning Curious now is honestly just fine. So it's just not another option for tier. I agree that this was very late and this should have happened a while ago, but at the same point, this is just going to be another problem down the road that I think is just better off to deal with now. Same thing with Mystic Mine. This is a card that's just overall fairly degenerate, especially the standalone build with Mystic Mine Burn. It's just so crazy being able to set up Mystic Mine with Field Barrier and multiple Solemn Judgments, which is just not healthy for the game whatsoever. So I definitely like the fact that this card's gone. Another thing that I really didn't like about Mystic Mine was the fact that post-siding, if you weren't prepared for it, then you just auto-lost, because when you go first, you almost never keep in back row out. So you just lost a Mystic Mine, which was terrible. So this is something else that I think is a lot better just to get rid of, because especially when the combo decks can play it, it's a very scary card with the amount of pressure that it can apply on a board, and it can literally just win you a game outright because your opponent doesn't have it out. And this is something that I definitely think should have been banned a long time ago, and this is again just one of those things that was a little late, but I think better late than never, right? This is a card that just needed the ban. Very happy to see it go. This card can be banned forever as far as I'm concerned. Thank you, Konami, for doing this. Fantastic idea. The next thing I want to talk about is going to be Herald of the Orange Light. I think that this was just really a rough hit. I think that I would have preferred Havness to 1 over Herald to 1. I just think that it's really insane that Featherstorm didn't get banned. Floowandereeze got no hits whatsoever, but then Orange Light gets hit to 1, so we can't deal with D Shifter as efficiently. And a lot of people are like, well, you just win when you Orange Light the D Shifter. And I'm like, well, I just lose when I don't Orange Light the D Shifter. Like, it doesn't really matter. Because the whole argument is that D Shifter at least lets the other player set up, but realistically what it does is auto win you the game against tier. And so it's really unfortunate that if you have the Orange Light, you win, and then the rogue strategy just loses because D Shifter didn't resolve. But it's also really unfortunate when you activate D Shifter and then the combo deck just loses outright. I think that while D Shifter exists, Herald also has to exist. So I think this is just a hit that I really don't agree with. Probably just end up going back to really relying on Gamma. Still ended up playing the Orange Light and Callby in the main deck just because you want to have some kind of out for D Shifter. But this is just something that, like I said, is just not going to be very healthy for the game to get rid of. We've seen this in other formats too, with like Drytron be really relevant. And overall, I think the Orange Light's a very strong card. But being hit on the list, I don't really feel like this is very warranted. I think that it's good in the sense that you can not really have a consistent way to go like Herald pitch Kelbeck, especially against like a rogue strategy. But objectively, this card was just to stop D Shifter. So I really have mixed feelings about this one, because overall, I don't really think that it should have been hit. Like, I understand why it was, but I think that Orange Light definitely should have been the card to stay at 3 and just hit like Havness to 1. And I think it would have been a fair trade either way. Having the semi-limits to the Recital and then also just seeing Tenki at 3, I think that's really cool. I think that it brings Tri-Sprite to one of the best decks of the format. I think that's a really neat deck, especially because you have to play around these Shizu shufflebacks by just making sure that your tri-names are banished, because if you flip Revolt and then the Mudora or Keldo can just spin back names to deck, then you just like lose. But I think now more than ever, if you have your cards banished and you have access to Revolt and get that banish on like a Rukalos, you get a banish on like a Kit Kalos or a Kaleido Heart, that's going to be really impactful. So that's something that I think is definitely going to be a really cool deck. There's a lot that you can do in Tri-Sprite. So I really think that that's going to be a really solid deck moving forward, and another option for the meta if you want to go ahead and try that out. If you want to see a video on like Tri-Sprite, definitely let me know. I can make that happen. A really nice in-depth guide into like how to play the deck, what the end boards are, what the list looks like. I think that'd be a really fun video to make. Overall, though, I think Ptolemaeus is fine. Diamond is a really strong card, has 3 effects, really crazy floodgate. But you got to understand that back when we had Diamond, we didn't have Droplet, we didn't have Dark Ruler, we didn't have a half the outs that we do now. So I really don't know if it's going to be as crazy as it was before. It's still an insane card, don't get me wrong. But I think that even just summoning Dweller still, because it's a lingering effect, is still just fine. I don't think that you need to just run Ptolemaeus into Diamond. It's also 2 extra deck slots because you have to run Ptolemaeus and Diamond. So I think that that's something that might be a deterrent whenever you're trying to figure out like what you want to do moving forward. Because there's a couple different targets that you can make with Ptolemaeus, being like Pleiades, you can make Infinity, you can go for the Diamond. But overall, I just don't really think that it's going to be super impactful, as most cards that come off the ban list really aren't, unless they're just like insane cards like Snatch Steal, right? Back when that card just got immediately rebanned, and Snow. But I don't think that Ptolemaeus is one of those cards, at least right now, that's going to be a huge problem. I think in the future, just because of the way this card is designed, I just see that it will end up being a problem again, but we'll see when that comes. And then Metaverse, this is just a card that's never really been for a good reason either. Being able to activate Necro Valley, being able to activate Mystic Mine. I know Mystic Mine's banned now, but that's all the card's really been good for. You're never activating Metaverse and adding Hidden City. Like, this is not what you're doing. The ability to just quick effect activate a field spell is pretty insane, because field spells are usually going to be one of the most broken types of cards that we have in the game. That's why there's several on the ban list right now. So I just see Metaverse also becoming a problem again, but we'll have to see. And then lastly, D-Fissure Macro. These cards should never have went past 1. They just should never have went past 1. These are just insane. It's Kashira support 100%, but at the same time, there's so many cards in the game right now just trying to go against tier. I'd almost rather them just hit tier and left cards like these alone, because now they're just super consistent to get to, which is really insane. And I feel like this is almost way worse for tier than just hitting tier, because especially like D-Fissure is cool because you can twin and you know where it's at. But if you like miss with twin and they have a second macro, or you have to prioritize other cards, then it's just gonna be rough. Because the reason why I say that is since twin is usually something that you hold for the floodgate, but if you're playing against Flaunderies, you're trying to snipe the trap in the standby phase. So if there's multiple sets, it's just really rough. And that's where like Lightning Storm is gonna be a lot better. But these cards should never win past 1. Like Macro in general is just such a crazy card. I just think this is just really not healthy for the game. We saw Skill Drain come back to 3, and as much as that was an eye roll and a lot of people didn't like to see that, I think these are just objectively worse. These are just really annoying to see. And it's just because, like, if you look at any deck usually in the meta ever, the graveyard is such a key factor in how you play the game. And having a grave to go and get cards back from using cards, like even in the past, like Emerald, or going to special things back from the graveyard, it's just, the graveyard is such a key component of the game. And I feel like if we're going into a format that's just constantly shutting off the graveyard, they need to print more decks that just don't care about the graveyard. I mean, we have Cashier coming up, but at the same point, there's not a whole lot of options that really don't care about their graveyard. So this is definitely interesting to see. Definitely did not expect that this morning. Something that I do think is kind of funny, though, is that you can Rukalos and negate Macro, because the fact that Macro attempts to summon a monster on resolution, whether or not you're actually going to summon. So I think that's really cool as an interaction. This is just something that is going to be a part of my end boards 100% of the time now. And it's kind of funny to say that you're not just having Rukalos for like a Nibiru or a Bestial, you have it for Macro's Cosmos. So that's kind of crazy. Also in siding, I feel like these cards are going to be mandatory now. Unending Nightmare to go ahead and deal with cards like Necro Valley, deal with the macros, the D-Fissures. This card in general is just very strong, and we see it pop in and out of formats. Also, Lightning Storm, if you're a tier player, I feel like now more than ever, you have to hold Havness. You can't just use it on your opponent's turn. if you open the lightning storm, you just have to prioritize being able to use this, because even against Flanneries, if you force out Dreaming Town, that's fine if you don't snipe it in like the standby phase, because this checks for the macros, it checks for the storms, it gets rid of the map. Like there's so many things that lightning storm just clears immediately that you just don't have to worry about anymore. So I think that this is just one of the best sideboard cards of the format currently moving forward. I think this is going to be very important just because, again, it's going to be very 50-50 flu versus tier. So my side is probably going to be like 3 Zombie World and a Banshee and like 3 Lightning Storm. And I might just main a copy of Unending Nightmare, to be completely honest with you, just to make sure that I can at least play the game. Because in a world where you have Havness in your hand, you can at least like set Unending Nightmare and pass to your opponent, and then just go Unending, pop macro, pop D-Fissure, pop map, and then if your opponent does anything, you can go, all right, cool, Havness effect, play the game. As long as you're not under a D-Shifter, you can still have the option to at least try and play the game. So I think Unending Nightmare in general is going to be one of the best answers to the format, as well as Lightning Storm. Other than that, I don't really think that there's a lot of things that are going to be too different than what they are now, because you also got to realize that like these only matter if tier goes second. But like if tier goes first, it's still going to be like the same crazy end board that you got to deal with. And this is probably something that I'll go back to as well, is going IP into Trisbana or IP into Zero Boros and just wiping the board if my opponent sets up multiple cards. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest key factors in today's just play lines, is making sure that we can go ahead and just clear the board before your opponent can really set up the D-Fissures, the macros. And again, if tier goes first, I just don't really see those cards being actively a problem. I definitely think that this format's going to be interesting, and I don't think that having macro D-Fissure is going to be the end of the world, but I definitely think that it's going to make things really hard for playing tier, especially if you have to go second and you have to really rely on board clears. If you haven't already joined my Discord, Twitch, Twitter, or Instagram, definitely go ahead and do so. And if you want a coaching session over on Metafy, definitely PM me on Discord and we can have a conversation about a session coming up. I hope that everyone has a wonderful night, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.